Okay, let's dive in. When we talk about weight, energy balance, it always comes back to that simple idea, right? Calories in, calories out.
Yeah, that's the standard thinking. Eat less, burn more, lose weight. Seems logical.
And the burn more part feels really intuitive. You
Yeah.
exercise, you burn calories, so, exercise more, you burn more energy overall that day. Simple addition.
It does feel like it should just add up like that.
Yeah.
But the research we're looking at today, it paints a much more complex picture. Our bodies are, well, smarter than basic arithmetic.
Right. And it's that complexity, especially on the calories outside, that we're really digging into. There's this fascinating concept called energy compensation.
Exactly. It kind of challenges that whole straightforward view.
So today, we're exploring that. We've got sources looking at metabolism, activity tracking,
Yeah.
even how we absorb calories. The mission is to unpack what's really going on with energy balance.
Yeah, to get past the assumptions and figure out, what actually matters based on the science.
Okay, so let's start with that typical scenario. You figure your baseline burn is, say, 2,000 calories a day, just existing.
Your resting metabolism plus daily life stuff.
Then you go for a hard run. Your watch says, I don't know, 600 calories burned.
Okay.
And maybe later you hit the gym, another 400 calories according to the machine in your tracker.
Right, so that's 1,000 extra calories burned from activity.
Exactly. The simple math says 2,000 baseline plus 1,000 exercise is 3,000 total for the day. You feel great thinking you created a big deficit if you only ate 2,000.
And this is where it gets really interesting. That's where energy compensation kicks in. Your body doesn't necessarily just tack on that extra 1,000 calories.
Yeah, how does that work? What's the body actually doing?
Think of your body having a total energy budget for the day. When you spend a lot in one category, like an intense exercise, it doesn't just automatically get a bigger budget. It often tries to, well, cut spending somewhere else to compensate.
Cut spending? Like what?
It might reduce the energy it allocates to other things, maybe background physiological processes, immune function, tissue repair, even little unconscious movements, like fidgeting less later in the day.
Okay, so it's like similar to how your metabolism might dip if you drastically cut calories, that kind of adaptation.
Precisely. It's the same kind of adaptive intelligence. Food scarce, slow things down, activity demands suddenly way up, find efficiencies elsewhere.
Wow. So the body's constantly making these trade-offs, prioritizing where the energy goes.
It seems so.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a theory. There are, long-term studies that really show this compensation effect in action.
The sources mention something about evolution too. Hunter-gatherers versus, like, us.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. The thinking is that populations with super high activity levels but maybe unreliable food sources think hunter-gatherers would have really benefited from strong compensation.
Makes sense. Survival.
Right. Their bodies would get incredibly efficient, dialing back non-essential energy use to fuel all that activity. It might have even influenced average body size over generations.
Whereas populations with more stable food and maybe less intense daily activity.
They might have had less pressure for that extreme compensation, maybe allowing more energy for growth, leading to potentially larger body sizes. It's a compelling hypothesis.
And modern studies kind of echo this.
They do. We see studies where people exercise consistently for weeks, like 40 weeks in some cases.
Right.
And they measure a decrease in their basal metabolism. The energy burned just at rest. The body adapted. It got more efficient at its core function.
And it's not just metabolism, right? You mentioned other effects.
Yeah, the sources point out that really excessive activity, especially in women, can impact other systems. Like it can suppress ovarian function, lower estrogen. It's a clear sign the body is reallocating resources away from, say, reproduction because the exercise demand is so high.
That's a powerful example. So the big takeaway here is your body isn't a simple adding machine. More exercise doesn't automatically mean that much more total energy burned.
Exactly. It's a dynamic manager.
Okay, so if the body compensates, that helps explain something that always seemed a bit weird. Why doesn't someone super active, like maybe an endurance athlete or imagining those hunter-gatherers, burn like triple the total calories of someone sedentary?
Compensation is definitely a huge part of that answer. The body finds ways to conserve energy elsewhere. Maybe they move less during the rest of the day. Maybe those internal processes slow down a bit.
So there's a kind of ceiling effect.
It looks like it. The research suggests that total daily energy expenditure might plateau. You add more and more activity, but the total burn doesn't keep rising proportionally. Maybe it levels off after adding perhaps 500 net calories from activity.
Only 500 net. Even if the workout burned way more according to the tracker.
Potentially, yes. There are definitely diminishing returns when looking at the total daily expenditure.
The source material put some numbers on this, right? Like for every bit of movement.
Yeah, they mentioned studies using accelerometers, measuring counts per minute, basically how much you move. And for every, say, 100 units of that movement, the actual increase in total daily burn might only be about 50 calories.
Only half.
Yeah.
Wow, so the other half was compensated for somehow.
That's what the data suggests. And there's an average compensation figure they mentioned too.
What was that?
On average, for every 100 calories you burn during the exercise itself, your body compensates by reducing spending elsewhere by about 28 calories.
28%. So the net gain is only around 72 calories, not the full 100.
Exactly. It's a significant chunk that just kind of disappears from the net total because the body adjusted elsewhere.
Does it matter how you exercise? Like intensity?
It seems to, yeah. The
Yeah.
compensation effect looks like it might be less strong with lower intensity stuff. Think walking, zone 2 cardio, where you can still talk comfortably. Compared to really high intensity work like HIIT or heavy lifting, that lower intensity might not trigger such a drastic compensatory downregulation from the body.
Interesting. And there was also that point about people starting from scratch. Sedentary folks.
Right, it's a subtle point, but the idea is if you're very sedentary, your body might have more optional energy expenditures it can cut back on when you start exercising. So initially, their net increase from exercise might look a bit bigger proportionally than someone who's already active, but they're still compensating.
Okay, this is kind of blowing up this simple exercise more, burn more model. So if intense exercise isn't the magic bullet for dramatically jacking up your total daily burn because of compensation, what is a better strategy according to the sources?
The clearest advice coming through is build muscle fast.
Resistance training. Why muscle?
Because muscle tissue itself is metabolically active. It burns calories just sitting there, even when you're resting. It's part of your lean mass.
Unlike fat tissue, which is less active.
Much less active, yeah. So when you add muscle, you're increasing your resting metabolic rate, your baseline burn, 200/7.
Okay, so building muscle is like upgrading your body's engine to be slightly bigger and burn more fuel all the time.
That's a great analogy.
Whereas just doing more cardio without building muscle is like revving the existing engine harder, but the system finds ways to become more fuel efficient to cope.
Exactly. Muscle increases the baseline. And there's another layer to this tied to body fat based on newer research.
What's the connection with body fat?
Well, studies from around 2020 onwards suggest that people with higher body fat percentages tend to experience more energy compensation when they exercise.
Wait, more fat means more compensation? How does that work?
The idea is that their bodies are perhaps better adapted or have more pathways available to reduce energy expenditure in other areas when faced with the cost of exercise. So for every 100 calories burned during activity, they might compensate by more than that 28-calorie average.
So carrying more fat actually makes the net calorie burn from exercise smaller.
It seems that way, potentially creating a tough cycle, right?
Yeah.
More fat, more compensation, smaller net burn from exercise, harder to lose fat.
Wow. That really highlights why focusing on building that metabolically active muscle tissue is so strategic, regardless of activity compensation.
Definitely. It tackles the baseline burn directly.
Okay, so we've got calories out, thoroughly complicated. What about the other side, calories in? The sources had something surprising there, too, about absorption.
Absolutely. We assume if the label says 200 calories, we get 200 calories. But it's not quite that simple. We don't actually absorb 100% of the potential energy from our food.
You mean like the classic corn example, seeing it later?
Huh. Yes, exactly that. If a bit graphic. If it passes through undigested, you didn't get those calories. What matters for your energy balance are the calories that actually make it across your gut lining.
What kind of things affect how much we absorb?
Several factors. Fiber is a big one. It can bind to calories and nutrients and speed things up, meaning less time for absorption. Your unique gut microbiome plays a huge role, too, in how food is broken down. And interestingly, your energy status matters. If you're in a deficit, your body tends to get more efficient at pulling calories out. In a surplus, maybe a little less efficient.
And this difference?
Yeah.
It can actually add up. It's not trivial.
Oh, it can be quite significant. Normally, you might lose, say, up to 10% of potential calories in waste. But if someone has malabsorption issues, it could be 20% or more.
The source gave a really clear example of this.
Yeah, imagine two people. Both eat 2,500 calories according to labels. Person A maybe due to high fiber or gut bugs, loses 10% unabsorbed. Person B only loses 2%.
Yeah.
That's a 200-calorie difference in absorbed energy every single day.
200 calories. That's like a decent run's worth of energy.
Exactly, just from differences in absorption. It really underscores that calories in isn't just the number on the packet.
And even how you cook food changes things.
It does. Cooking generally makes things more digestible, so you absorb more calories than eating raw. Even cooling down cooked starches like potatoes or pasta creates resistant starch, which is harder to digest, slightly lowering the absorbed calories compared to eating them hot. It's all quite nuanced.
Okay, wow. So expenditure is complicated by compensation. Intake is complicated by absorption. Given all this, what about our attempts to actually track the calories out part with, our watches and rings?
The trackers. This is probably one of the most impactful findings in the source material for a lot of people. The bottom line, they're often highly inaccurate for calorie expenditure.
You mean the smartwatches, fitness bands?
Yeah.
All that. The ones using heart rate, movement, or stats?
Those exact ones.
Oh.
While they can be useful for tracking steps or heart rate zones, maybe sleep, their calorie burn estimates are frequently way off.
How far off are we talking?
The sources cite major reviews, like one from 2020, showing error rates over 50% weren't uncommon. Some devices, even in controlled lab settings, overestimated calorie burn by more than 200%.
200%?
Yeah.
That's not even in the same ballpark.
Exactly. It completely undermines trying to use those numbers for precise energy balance calculations.
So it's not just that they're a little bit off.
Right.
They can be wildly inaccurate.
And inconsistent, too. The sources mention they often lack both accuracy getting the right number and precision getting the same number consistently. So relying on them for, I burned X so I can eat X is, well,
Flawed.
deeply flawed, yeah. Which leads directly to that common practice. People checking their watch after a workout and thinking, great, I burned 500 calories, now I can have that treat.
The sources had a pretty strong take on that eating back your exercise calories idea.
Very strong. They basically say it's a bad idea for two main reasons.
What's reason number one?
Mental health. Viewing food and exercise in that purely transactional way, earning calories, paying for food with exercise, can be really harmful. It's a pattern often seen in disordered eating. It's just not a healthy relationship with food or your body.
That's a really important point. And the second reason is it just doesn't work physically.
Right. Because of energy compensation. That 500 calories your watch said you burned during the workout. That doesn't mean your total daily burn went up by 500 calories. It probably went up by much less.
Maybe only 350 or 400 if that 28% compensation average holds true.
Exactly. So if you eat back the full 500 based on the tracker, you're likely putting yourself into a surplus without realizing it. The tracker's math just doesn't reflect your body's reality.
Okay, so if the trackers are unreliable for out and in is variable and compensation messes with the exercise part, how on earth can anyone actually figure out their energy balance and make adjustments? It sounds impossible.
It sounds impossible if you're trying to measure every little variable precisely, which, as we've seen, you basically can't. But the sources offer a much more practical, effective solution.
Which is?
Focus on the outcome. Track your average body weight trend over a consistent period, maybe like 14 days.
Average weight. Why is that better?
Because your weight trend is the integrated result of everything. It automatically accounts for all the complexities. Calories eaten, calories actually absorbed, baseline metabolism, exercise burn, non-exercise movement, and the impact of energy compensation.
So it captures the net result of all those hidden factors.
Precisely. It's the most honest feedback loop you have. If your average weight over 2 weeks is trending up, you're in a surplus. Trending down, you're in a deficit. Stable, you're roughly at maintenance. It cuts through all the noise.
And then you use that trend to adjust your food intake.
Exactly. The sources talk about just using that weight trend signal. If your weight isn't moving the way you want, you gently adjust your food intake. Maybe slightly smaller portions, maybe swap some calorie-dense foods for less dense ones. You use the real-world feedback from the scale, not the potentially misleading numbers from a device.
That seems much more manageable and grounded in reality.
It is. It respects the complexity without needing to measure it perfectly.
Okay, let's try and summarize the key takeaways from all this. It's a lot to process.
Right. Takeaway 1. Exercise calories don't just add up linearly. Your body compensates.
2, those calorie burn estimates from your fitness tracker. Highly inaccurate. Don't base your diet around them.
3. Trying to eat back the calories shown on your tracker is flawed, both mentally and physically due to compensation.
4, Exercise has diminishing returns for total daily calorie burn beyond a certain point.
Yeah.
More isn't always proportionally more.
5. Compensation means your body is smart. It finds ways to save energy elsewhere when activity is high.
6. Lower intensity activity might cause less compensation than super high intensity stuff.
7. Building muscle is highlighted as a more effective way to increase your baseline resting metabolism.
8. Remember, you don't absorb 100% of the calories you eat. Absorption varies.
And the big practical one, number 9, use your average weight trend over time, like 2 weeks, as your main guide for adjusting food intake. It's the most reliable indicator of your actual energy balance.
Wow. This deep dive really changes the perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Energy balance is so much more intricate than just calories and out math.
It really is. Understanding compensation, absorption, and tracker limits, it forces you to think differently about exercise, diet, and how you measure progress.
It shifts the focus away from chasing potentially meaningless numbers.
And towards building consistent habits, listening to your body's actual feedback, like that weight trend, and respecting its adaptability.
So, thinking about all this, how does knowing your body is this constantly adapting, compensating system? How does it change how you, the listener, might approach your own health goals, especially when your watch is flashing these big, seemingly simple calorie numbers at you?
It's definitely something to reflect on. Maybe it encourages focusing more on the consistency of the behavior, the exercise itself, the healthy eating, rather than obsessing over calculations that might not be accurate anyway. Trust the process and trust your body's feedback.